Kids, welcome to the Far Out Podcast. How you doing today? You doing good? You doing great? That's good to hear. I'm glad to hear it. Me? How am I doing? Well, thank you for asking. I'm also doing great, and I'm doing so well because I have an absolute buffet of things that I want to talk to you about on this very episode of the podcast. So let's just dive right in, kids. Get your utensils, get your napkins, and get two plates because there is a lot that I want to discuss. Starting off with this. I've been playing more Battlefield 6 lately, and as I've said before over the course of this podcast, I love this game. I love Battlefield. And what's funny is that, this was literally like not quite a day one purchase for me, but it was pretty early in its life cycle. I was there, kids. I was there, kids, when this game was coming out, when the rollout was ramping up. There was all this talk about how it's a return to form for Battlefield and how, we're going to get back to the roots and get back to the combat and the game mechanics that you all know and love, that you grew up with over the decades. And we as Battlefield fans, myself included, were, optimistic but cautiously because, we've been, once bitten, twice shy type deal when it comes to this franchise. But kids, Battlefield 6 came out and it became a roaring success. And I have to agree, after playing it for many hours and whatnot. I've been really enjoying my time with it. And funny enough, though, despite me giving it such a glowing review, I actually stopped playing it for a couple of weeks, and I don't know why. I truly I don't know why. It's not like I got bored with it. It's not like I got upset with it. It's not like there were some glitches or anything like that. On the contrary, in fact, Battlefield 6 has been a pretty smooth experience for myself. You know, game in, game out, and whatnot. I don't know why I put down the controller with it. And I just kind of went back to my standard rotation of Halo, Rocket League, and a few other games and whatnot. And yeah, so then just one day I decided to get back into the battlefield, as it were, and look, this game has not lost a step. Like it's so much fun. Like if you're new to the Battlefield franchise, welcome. I hope you enjoy this game, and I hope that you do decide to pick this one up and give it a spin. But if you're a returning player who's been a Battlefield veteran like myself, kids, then I think you're really going to enjoy this game. And if you have put it down for a bit, perhaps you're also looking for something new and fresh, pick this one back up again because it will feel just as fun and just as fresh as it did when it launched. The gunplay, fantastic movement, is great. Sound design, incredible. Vehicle combat is great. Maps are only getting better. The gadgets and whatnot, customization. This game has so many awesome details to it that just make it a really fun experience, front to back, game in, game out. And yeah, I'm really enjoying my time with Battlefield 6, and yeah, I hope that anyone else out there who listens to this podcast and takes my opinions with some merit. I hope that they think, you know, he sure does like that Battlefield game. Maybe I'll pick it up. And if you do decide to get this game, kids, perhaps I'll see you on the battlefield. Anyway, kids, moving on into the world of sports, I want to talk about hockey now. More specifically, I want to talk about my Minnesota Wild. And most recently, at the time of this recording, this being recorded on the 1st of February, happy February to y'all. The Wild most recently played the Oilers, in which we beat them 7-3. So, hoorah, good for you guys, go team. But I actually want to back it up a little further to when we last played the Calgary Flames. We beat them 4-1. And the reason why I want to go back to that game, kids, is because I was actually at that game. Yes, kids, getting to see the Wild beat the Calgary was my second Minnesota Wild game and my mother's first. And boy, we had a great time. And look, I'm new to the world of hockey. I've been a fan for maybe a year, perhaps maybe a little less than a year if I actually crunch the numbers. I don't know all the positions. I don't know all the rules. I don't even know all the vernacular, but the energy of hockey, you can't match it. And I'm all in on hockey, and I'm all in on the Wild. And yes, as I said, this is my second game. My mother's first. We went together, and I got to be honest. This game was way better than the first game I went to, where we played the newest addition to the NHL, the Utah Mammoth. And look, I had a great time at that game. I did. I really enjoyed myself. It was awesome, being in that arena, seeing the ice and hearing everything. It was amazing. But, like, let's just compare it, black to white, apples to oranges. Like, we lost when we played the Utah Mammoth. So my first game, we I left on a loss. This game though, we won, and we won in incredible fashion. This game had everything. It had multiple goals, so that freaking air horn was just blasting throughout the arena, and you can freaking feel that thing in your chest, which is just awesome. On top of that, there was a fight, like a bare knuckle fight, not even gloves. Like it was so awesome. I don't remember the exact players, but it was in the first period, I believe. And right after we had scored our first goal, we were skating back to center ice, and it was immediately after the puck was dropped by the ref for the face-off. One of the Minnesota Wild players and one of the Flames players flicked off their gloves. They did, just threw down their arms and their gloves popped off, and they went to a bare knuckle brawl. And what I like to think happened is that after that goal, I bet we started to chirp at the Flames, and we were like, that's the first of many. And Mr. Flames was like, oh, okay, how about it? I'll see you at center ice. I bet there was a mutual agreement to handle this thing with fists and whatnot, and because they both did it in unison right away. They were on the same page, Mr. Wild and Mr. Flames over there. So yeah, they flick off their gloves at center ice and they get into a bare knuckle brawl. And that's a cool thing about hockey is that like they let you fight, at least for the most part, which is funny because again, going back to my Utah Mammoth game, there were several times where players were like kind of slapping each other, kind of grabbing, pushing each other and whatnot, and the refs broke it up. And it's like the crowd wants to see them fight. I want to see them fight. And the refs got in the way, but not this time. The second those gloves came off, the refs kind of formed a little circle and we just went at it, bare knuckle scrapping on the ice. And I'll tell you this much too, kids. The Wild, we won that fight. We took down Mr. Flames, like literally took him down to the ice and just gave him haymakers and whatnot. It was awesome. So yeah, getting to see a bare knuckle hockey fight, like that was incredible. Also, there were some incredible moments throughout this game as well. There were one timers, there were breakaways, and then at one point there was this long pass. Someone on the Wild team did this I mean, nearly the full length of the ice, just passed this thing, passed the puck down the length of the arena, and literally one of the other Wild players, the guy receiving the pass, literally caught the puck in the air with his glove, caught it like a baseball, and dropped it in front of him, and slapped it in for a goal and whatnot. So it was freaking nuts. And then I had a guy behind me who was just cheering. We're all going, as the horn was sounding and whatnot. And this guy behind me said, "Get that man a Vikings contract," because yeah, he caught a heck of a pass, an airborne pass with his with his gloved hand, drops the puck down in front of him, picks it up with his stick, and shoots a shot, and there goes the goal. So yeah, it was freaking awesome, kids. And oh man, I love hockey so much, and I'm so glad to be a part of this team and whatnot, to have another extension into my Minnesota sports fandom. And yeah, as I said, this was my second game, but it was my mom's first, and for her to get kind of the a quintessential hockey experience again with your home team winning, with lots of goals, with breakaways, with one-timers, with a fight. Like this game had all the trimmings of what hockey should be, and yeah, it was really fun to see. So yeah, go wild. And what's funny, kids, is that year 2025, even though we're now in 26. In 25, we celebrated as an organization. It was 25 years Wild Hockey. The team was founded in the year 2000, and then in 25 marked the 25th year of the organization. And so, yeah, I kind of accidentally stumbled into a really cool time to become a fan, and to get to see us go on this just awesome tear as a team is pretty cool. So yeah, go wild. Anyway, kids, moving on now into the world of movies, but also keeping it somewhat in the world of hockey. I have a question to ask y'all. Kids, do you believe in miracles? Well, you should, because as I was walking around the stadium when I was at my Minnesota Wild game, they've got all the stands and they've got the concessions and the merch shops and so on, but there's also a lot of, plaques and signs, that commemorate things throughout either the founding of the team, notable achievements, stuff about the city and whatnot. And there was a plaque that was talking about the Miracle on Ice game, where the U.S. hockey team beat the Soviets in the 1980 Olympic Games. And I did not know this, despite me being a hockey fan, despite me being a huge Minnesota sports fan, and despite me seeing the movie Miracle numerous times. I don't think I ever fully connected the dots on this cool factoid. For the U.S. team for the 1980 Winter Olympic Games, there are 20 players on the team, 20 hockey players. 12 of them, over half, 12 out of 20 players on that U.S. Olympic team came from Minnesota. I did not know that. I did not know that. Some of them were from Minneapolis, St. Paul, Grand Rapids, you name it. I did not know that the majority of the Olympic team for the 1980 Winter Games was comprised of Minnesota players. I had no idea. I like, and again, kids, I've seen the movie Miracle before many times. I have very vivid memories of watching this game at my grandfather's house, or grandparents, I should say. And, you know, like I never put those things together. And I'm guessing the reason why I remember watching it numerous times at my grandparents' place was because uh it's a huge, it's a huge rah-rah movie for, us as, US citizens and whatnot. But I'm guessing they had that one on DVD or, whatever, because of the ties to Minnesota, with it being kind of a local hero story as well. I never connected those dots. And so I'm looking at this plaque in the stadium talking about how 12 out of 20 players from the Miracle game uh, were from Minnesota. And I'm like, you're kidding. 'Cause again, over half of the team came from Minnesota. And so after my mother and I, leave the game, we watch the Flames win, we travel back to our respective homes and whatnot. I decided to rewatch Miracle now with a completely different mindset, a completely different view on the movie. And now being much older, I have not seen that movie in a couple of years. I think the last time I saw it was maybe when I was in college, and even then, I still don't think I fully connected the Minnesota roots to the Miracle on Ice game. And that's what the game is dubbed as the Miracle on Ice game, because before I get into the movie itself, I want to give kind of some historical context for this game, because this game is dubbed a miracle game because this game, the 1980s, you have to go back in time, kids. During this time period, where we were fighting the Russians in the Olympic Games, they weren't even the Russians back then; they were still the Soviet Union, and the Soviets were considered one of the best, if not the singular best, ice hockey team in the world. They had won 4 consecutive gold medals dating back to the 1964 Olympics, and they went on this incredible run for decades. Like every time they hit the ice, you were just destined to lose. Doesn't matter if it was by 1 goal, by 5 goals, 7, 10. Like they were considered by the world to be, quote, an invincible team. Every time they showed up, they were gonna just pummel you into submission. And as I said, kids, they won 4 consecutive gold medals in the Olympics. So every time they went, they were the top dog and whatnot. Everyone else was considered an underdog. And then you get this young, plucky team of not even pro players. They were kids out of college. The majority came from Minnesota and Massachusetts and whatnot. The average age of a player for the U.S. team in the 1980 Olympics was 21. 21 was the average age. And these players, these kids, did not have a lot of time to get to know each other. They did not have a lot of literal rep time together and whatnot. Whereas you look at the Soviets, and they literally had years, if not decades, worth of playing time together. They were so cohesive in their movement and their passing and their shooting and their scoring and their defensive techniques. They, as I said, they were described as an invincible opponent. And then you have the US trying to literally not embarrass themselves on the world stage. They're trying to put together this team, and yet you have a bunch of college students, trying to just scrape together enough to put up a chance and whatnot. And then they go to the Olympics and whatnot, and they end up winning. Spoiler for history and for the movie, but the U.S. team ends up beating the Soviets on the world stage and whatnot, and they go on to win the gold medal. And what's interesting is that as you look at history regarding this movie, yeah, the Olympics represent all the nations and whatnot. So you got Swedish, you got Finland and whatnot, and everyone is playing for their respective teams. Understandably, they all want their nation to succeed and whatnot. But if you look back at the history of this, again, this is during the Soviet Union era of history, and so like, yes, all the respective nations wanted to win their games. I'm sure, you know, the Swedens would have loved to have won a gold medal, as did Finland and whatnot. But as the world saw the US advancing, there was this kind of groundswell of like, yeah, 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 we want our country to win, but we also really want the Soviet Union to lose, So go US type stuff. Like there was this kind of groundswell movement of patriotism, of a sense of coming together to defeat a common enemy, because this is during a very turbulent time when you know um, the Soviets were invading Afghanistan, and there's all this other world turmoil that's going on as well. And the movie also comments on that as well. But yeah, it's freaking nuts to have this piece of history, um, frankly, just exist, but then to also know that it has such close roots to myself. Again, being a guy from the Midwest, I live in North Dakota, but my roots really do extend to Minnesota as well. It's like my second home type deal. And so for me to know this now about world history, my country's history, my state's history is freaking remarkable. And then I want to get into the actual movie as well. This movie is led by Kurt Russell, who plays the coach, and his mission is to whip these kids into shape, to stand up to the Soviets and to again to try to not embarrass the U.S. on the world stage, but to also win as well. And this movie is freaking incredible. It's directed by Gavin O'Connor, who's a really good director. He's made movies such as The Accountant and The Accountant 2, which are action fare. The Accountant 2 not as good, but The First Accountant's quite good. And then he also made another sports movie called The Way Back, which has to do with the sport of basketball. And Ben Affleck plays a coach who's dealing with alcoholism, and a way he's able to combat his alcoholism is to, coach this team to kind of pour himself into basketball. So Gavin O'Connor has a great sense of understanding when it comes to the gravity of sports and these moments in history and whatnot. And this movie is amazing because this thing takes its time. It shows you the relationships between all the players and the coaches and the staff. And, of a pool of, I don't know, 50, 60 players and whatnot who are trying out for this, you watch that group get whittled down to the 20 that become the U.S. team for the Olympics. And so as you're watching these kids try out, they're giving everything they got. They go from being over it and frustrated into just giving blood, sweat, and tears for the coach, for the sport. But at the end, 20 of 60 or so are going to make it. And so as you watch these kids push themselves to their limits, it's inspiring. But then when you find out that they're going to get cut, or that they have got cut, or they lose out to injury or whatnot, you feel that sense of like, dang it, like I wish he could have kept going. You're watching this emotional display from everyone about wanting to push themselves to not only be the best hockey player they can be, to represent their state, their university or whatnot, their family, but now they're also driving towards wanting to represent the U.S. and what this means for them. And so watching the team grow, both as individuals and as a unit, is inspiring, and watching the coaches grow as well is also really inspiring as well. And as I said, Gavin O'Connor, he weaves real world politics throughout this movie. Because it could have been very easy for him to just have it all be kind of a backdrop, and to not really focus on it, to more so focus on just the game itself, and maybe target more so just the relations between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, and he does more so focus on that. But like as I said, throughout the movie, he's making comments on things happening around the world at the time. As I said, the Soviet Union, invades Afghanistan. There are gas, shortages and stuff like that, and throughout the movie, he comments on these things, whether it's done through radio commentary, through, you know, montages and whatnot. He wants to put the state of the world in the mind of the viewer and have it be, connected to this game. How it's not just another game of hockey. It's not just another game in the Olympics, frankly. It is this is something for the world, to where, if the Soviets can't be beaten politically, then maybe we could beat them culturally, and this is going to take place at the Olympics on a hockey rink, and it's really, really powerful. And one thing that I found really, really remarkable in this movie is that they talk about presidencies throughout this movie. They comment on certain administrations, and one administration that they comment on is the Carter administration, and there's this speech that he gives in the movie. He himself doesn't give it, but it's played over the radio. You know what I mean? His There's audio of one of Carter's speeches that he gave in 1979, and this is from his Crisis of Confidence speech that again came from 79. And when this speech is played over a radio, Kurt Russell, who plays the coach, he's driving and he's listening to the speech be given over the radio. It's so poignant. It's so specific. It's a great it's a great container of all the emotions that not only the movie wants you to feel, but I think that the literal nation was feeling at the time. And I don't know much about Carter as presidency. I don't know anything about his administration, but leaving whatever politics aside, whether you love Carter or hate Carter, I have no idea. Um, the speech that he gives is remarkable, the Crisis of Confidence speech. And I want to read for verbatim what is said in the movie Miracle, because when this happened, I found myself literally rewinding the speech over and over and over again, because though this is given, though this speech was given back in 79, uh, it's very timely. You could say that this speech could be read in 2025 or 2026. It's very applicable to whenever you find it, save for a few references here and there. But yeah, I want to read this for verbatim. This is an excerpt from the Crisis of Confidence speech given by President Carter in the movie Miracle. Quote, "The erosion of our confidence in the future is threatening to destroy the social and the political fabric of America. The confidence that we have always had as a people is not simply some romantic dream or a proverb in a dusty book that we read just on the 4th of July. It is the idea that which founded our nation and has guided our development as a people. Confidence in the future has supported everything else. We've always believed in something called progress. We've always had a faith that the days of our children would be better than our own. Our people are losing that faith. For the first time in the history of our country, a majority of our people believe that the next 5 years will be worse than the past 5 years. We were taught that our armies are always invincible and our causes were always just, only to suffer the agony of Vietnam. We respected the presidency as a place of honor until the shock of Watergate. We've got to stop crying and start sweating, stop talking and start walking. Working together with our common faith, we cannot fail." End quote. I found that excerpt to be inspiring, and I found it to be really true. Again, Vietnam and Watergate they're in our rear view. Of course, we reference them We're taught about them in history classes, and you could find any number of resources on them. But despite that, the contents of this are very true. Yeah, there's a lot of pessimism towards our future right now. Yeah, and if you ask people directly, what are your thoughts on the country going forward? What are your thoughts on your own future? They might say, I don't know how to think about the next 5 years. People might have this bleak idea of what's to come, you know. But I also like the fact that Carter acknowledges that there comes a point where you have to stop crying and start sweating rather than complain about the situation, get to work to making it better. Stop talking and start walking. You know, put your put your words into action. You know, do something about your situation. Working together with a common faith, we cannot fail. And like I'm not saying, that, we have to have a common faith of like, we should all believe in Christ. Of course I advocate that follow our Father and whatnot. But I think Carter's more so getting at is having a faith in ourselves and in our country as well. And, you know, I think that we should put our words into actions, respectfully. I'm not saying we should go, you know, lead, violent uprisings and whatnot, but there are things that we can do as people. We can take agency in ourselves. And I think that that's really important and really profound, especially as it's told under the backdrop of the 1980 Olympics and also under the backdrop of just this movie, Miracle, which you can watch on DVD, cable, and the Disney Plus, where I watched it. And so, yeah, despite the past being in the past, with Carter, Vietnam, Watergate, and whatnot, the contents of this speech, I think, remain very true, and I found them to be very, very profound and very honest. And I like what was said. I really do. Um, you know, Stop crying and start sweating. Stop talking and start walking. You know, do those things respectfully. You know, and follow the law and be the best citizen that you can be. But take agency. Do something about your situation. We cannot fix the problems of the world, but if you yourself can fix something in your community, great. And even if you can't do that, even if you can't fix what's happening in your city or town, fix things that are happening in your life. Take agency of your life. Be responsible, be respectful. Bring up a family. Teach them fundamentals. Teach them how to be responsible and respectful. And I think that those small actions can go a long way. And so, yeah, on the movie Miracle, this wasn't my typical kind of standard fare for reviewing. But I'll just say this: if you're a fan of history, watch this movie. If you're a fan of sports, watch this movie. If you're a fan of Kurt Russell, watch this movie. Um, but if you feel a sense of patriotism, or even if you feel a sense of waning patriotism, I recommend you watch this movie. I think you will be entertained. I think you will be educated. And I also think you will be recharged when it comes to the red, white, and blue. And so, yeah, 2004's Miracle, starring Kurt Russell and directed by Gavin O'Connor, is a pretty great movie. And I really think you should watch it. All right, kids, moving on, but keeping it with movie reviews. I talked about how I thought Miracle was a really, really good movie. And I wish I could say the same for the next movie I want to talk about. But this one is kind of an interesting thing for me to discuss because I'm kind of at a crossroads with this one. I am talking about the new Jason Statham movie titled Shelter. And look, for a long time, Liam Neeson was my guy. He still is my guy. God bless him. But every action movie that came out with Liam Neeson in it, I was there. I did not need to see a poster, trailer. If it was a Liam Neeson action movie, I was there. Now, sadly, Neeson has, uh, you know, gotten up in age and he's no longer an action star. He's still acting again, good for him, but he's not doing Taken or Star Wars anymore. And so now new stars have kind of filled that position for him in my movie watching habits. And one of them is Jason Statham, to where if there's a new Statham movie, a new action movie by him, doesn't matter what the poster or trailer, I will go see it. And here's the thing that has bitten me a few times because his last couple outings I thought have not been very good. I at least myself, I did not like them. Like the Beekeeper, ugh, a Working Man, ugh, you know, these things were rough. They had a few okay spots, but they were rough. But Shelter is better. It's on the up and up. I like almost all the pieces in this movie. I like the simple story of Jason Statham being this reclusive, you know, soldier, this weathered action hero, and he has to end up protecting this girl who gets you know caught in the crossfire, wrong place, wrong time. Again, it's not Shakespeare. I like the simplicity of it. It just gets you going, and there's that. I also like the action. I think the literal combat scenes in this are better and more plentiful than have been in his previous movies, and I like the music as well. And I think the acting is good too. I think Statham is good, and I also think that the girl that he's protecting, I think that she can hold her own in this movie as well, which is really good. I've never seen her before, but if this is any indication of her talent, she will have a long, long career. And so yeah, you put together a simple, albeit decent, easy enough story, good action, good acting, and all that stuff. So did I like the movie? And this is where I'm struggling. And I don't know if I'm just dumb or what, or if I'm just having um, you know, kind of a lapse in judgment here. But despite me liking all the pieces to this, I don't know if I like the end result. Which like because you would think walking out of this movie, I'd be like, oh, this is it. You have to see this now. This is a return to form for Statham. I can't really give it its flowers. Like I can't say run to the theater to watch this, you know. And honestly, there are two conclusions I have with this thought. One, this movie deserves a rewatch from myself. So at some point, in the next couple of years, I will rewatch this movie because I don't remember ever having this kind of experience leaving a theater to where I liked a lot of the pieces in it, but I don't know if I really, air quotes, liked the end result, the finished product. For me, that's such an odd thing. Mm. But also, I think the reason why there might be a puncture in my, you know, in my fandom for this movie is I know this is going to sound kind of crazy. I might be grasping at straws here. I think it's the color palette. This is not a very warm movie. And I mean that in its literal presentation. Of course, it's serious, it's dramatic. You're not expecting warm and fuzzies. But this movie it's literally very gray, very dark. Lots of muted colors and muted environments. And I think that despite this movie not being very long, it's under 2 hours, but it felt long to me. It felt long. And I think the literal color palette of this movie kind of, uh, you know, zapped my energy. I think that's why. I think that's why I wasn't as engaged with it as I have been with other Jason Statham movies. Which again I find really curious if that is the genuine reason, but I can't put my finger on why I'm not, you know, like overjoyed with this movie. Again, I like the simple story. I like the action. I like the acting. Um, I like a lot that's in this movie, but just overall, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it. So yeah. Shelter. It is a good movie. I can say that, but like, despite it being air quotes good, I don't know if I can recommend it. Which again, you might think I'm just going crazy, and perhaps I am. Because again, I like everything about it, and I think it's good, but I'm not gonna recommend it, like whatnot. So I don't know. Again, I think that this is due for a rewatch, a reexamination by myself. I think I need to kind of give it its due because again, this is such an oddity for me. Um, but again, I don't know if I can really give it my endorsement of go see this now. I'll say this though, if you liked the previous Jason Statham action movies, this one is better in my opinion than the others. But yeah, just kind of the presentation, um, it just didn't have me on the edge of my seat, and yeah, so I think that you know overall, if I can try to kind of make my points make sense here, there are lots of good pieces in this movie, but I think it's just lacking a certain energy, and I think that energy, that lack of that, kind of affected me watching this in the theater. So maybe you'll have a different experience if you choose to check out this movie, and if anybody does, if I ever receive a comment or anything that says I watch Shelter, I'm not going to be like, oh, why bother? I'm going to be like, hey, great, like I get it, like trailers are good, Statham is good, like there's a lot to like. I hope you enjoyed it, but yeah, Shelter, um, just a weird entry in my 2026 movie journey. And yeah, it is one that I look forward to revisiting at some point. All right, kids, moving on, but keeping it with movie reviews. I want to talk about a movie, about a project more so, that I find frankly, to be really inspiring. This is a new movie that just got released at the time of this recording called Iron Lung. And if you don't know what that is, it's okay because I did not either. In fact, I did not know much about this movie at all. I had heard that it was releasing in some capacity, some way, and I more or less heard that it was a passion project. And if you don't know anything about this movie, this is made by a guy named Markiplier. At least that's his stage name on YouTube. I believe his like actual legal name is like Mark Fletcher or something. But Markiplier is this internet personality, this professional YouTuber, as it were. And I'm being sincere. I don't know who he is. I don't know what he does. I don't know how long he's been doing it. I don't know really anything about him. I don't watch him. Like I know that there are these big personalities on YouTube that get millions of views and whatnot. You think of like Mr. Beast and so on and so forth. But for whatever reason, Markiplier just he I missed him or he missed me or something. But I know the name enough to know that he exists, but I don't know anything about him. Well, I'm led to believe that one of the things that he does on his channel is that he must, play video games and do, walkthroughs and let's plays and stuff like that, for commentary. Because this movie called Iron Lung is based on a video game of the same name, and he made a movie out of it. And it's not just the fact that he like starred in it or that he directed it. No, I mean, this is a full-fledged passion project, front to back, every which way. He wrote this, directed it, starred in it, edited it, and he also self-financed it and distributed it. I mean, this is his project from inception to completion to release. When you think of movies, you think of like, you know, what's a good, Steven Spielberg movie? Oh, think of, I don't know, think of, E.T. or Raiders of the Lost Ark or Saving Private Ryan. But even Steven Spielberg, one of the best, if not the singular best director in the business, yeah, it's his movie, air quotes, his movie, but he only directed it. Or maybe he directed it and wrote it. And maybe he produced it alongside that as well. The point I'm making is that just because something is attributed to being someone's movie doesn't mean they did every single bit of the process involved in this. Sometimes directors just direct, sometimes writers just write, sometimes producers just produce, and then occasionally there's some cross the crossing of the wires to get a little more hands-on feel. With nowadays we have things that are known as like writer directors who they will both write the project, then they'll develop it into a movie, then they will direct the movie. But oftentimes they hand it over to different producers, different editors. They let casting be done by other people, so on and so forth. Markiplier, Mark Fletcher, this is his thing. Now, he did not do Iron Lung completely by himself. I mean, again, if you look at the credits, there's additional producers, there's casting, there's additional cast members, so on and so forth. But he is essentially hands-on with this in a way that most huge big budget films are not, including smaller films too, you know. And I don't know the exact figure for the production cost of this movie, but I've read that this movie Iron Lung costed anywhere between 3 to 4 million, so call it 3.5. So he put up over $3 million to make this movie, to make this passion project, And look, I think everyone at some point in their life wants to, quote, get into the arts. You want to be a filmmaker. You want to be a famous singer. You want to be, a famous athlete. Who knows? Everyone wants that kind of notoriety. At some point in our lives, we all chase fame. But very rarely do those things transition into real world achievements and real world goals. I myself would love to be a filmmaker. I don't know the single first thing about how to do that. I truly don't. And even if I did know how to do those things, I do not have millions of dollars to spend on a film, no matter how passionate I am about a project. Markiplier, though, put in the time, the work, and the money to see this thing to completion. And again, as someone like myself who aspires to someday work in film, whether I'm the guy that gets the coffee for the set, or I'm a writer, or I'm a director, or I'm an actor, who knows? As someone who wants to work in the film or in the medium of film, this is huge. Markiplier went from being just a YouTube internet personality to being a legitimate filmmaker. And now, at the time of this recording, there is a film called Iron Lung that he wrote, directed, starred, produced, and edited the whole deal. And it's in theaters right now. It is his passion project. And I love projects that are fueled by passion. On a very, very, very smaller and different scale, you can look at this podcast, me just deciding to just start it up in my apartment, more so in my kitchen, with just a couple of bucks and a dream. And look, even this very podcast itself has had audio issues. I'm not the best to do it, nor will I be the best, you know, yada yada. There are things that I could always do to make things better. I could always upgrade and get better at, certain aspects of the stuff. Okay, fine, sure. Then you navigate more so from a solo project like my podcast into something that I'm now doing with music. And as I said, people everywhere aspire to, you know, become famous in one degree or another. Sometimes we aspire to be musicians. You know, I'm now making music with my friend Francisco, known as Sojourn One. We have a band called Tugo. And like it's to me, it's still crazy to think that I've gone just from wanting to make music to now making music. You know, and you can debate the quality of that till the cows come home, sure, but but still, there is still music that my friend and I made from nothing into something. From writing to recording to editing to mixing to release. We did that. That's a full-fledged passion project. Because, the odds are when it comes to the music and the podcast, we're not going to make much money off either. Now, of course, we could make it big and the stars could align and, we could become, quote, rich and famous, but who knows? But we ourselves, speaking for myself and for Sojourn right now, we're doing this just for the love of the game. We're doing it just because we love to do it. And that's something that we try to keep in the front of our mind at all times when we're making something. Getting back to Markiplier and his film Iron Lung, you know, like, is this the greatest movie I've ever seen? No. And I'm sure if you asked him, he could probably tell you, I wish I would have done this differently. I wish I could have had more time for this. Wish I had more money for that. I wish I could have tweaked this. Who knows? Who knows? I bet he has some ideas of how this could have been made better. But I saw the movie. I saw Iron Lung. which is kind of rare for me as well because this is a scary movie. It's horror esque. It's not really scary. More so, it just kind of has like creepy imagery. But I digress. Really though, this kind of movie is not my cup of tea. I like superheroes. I like action. I like science fiction, fantasy, history, documentaries. I don't really go out for these kinds of things. But again, because I heard that this was his project from inception to completion to release, I thought, honestly, as cheeseball as this sounds, I thought I need to do my creative civic duty and go support this, go support him with my money, with my time. Because I could easily see myself being in his shoes one day where I have a project that I have fully made and I think it's the greatest thing ever. And I need to just put it out into the world and see what happens. I need to hope and pray and honestly convince people to come show up and check my thing out. So I decided to support him again, as I said, with my time and my money by sitting down in the theater and watching the movie. Let me talk about the movie now, Iron Lung. As I said, this is based on a video game I did not know existed, and a video game I have not played. I did not know anything about this until I sat down in the theater to absorb the material of this movie and this film. And I'll say this, despite me giving it such a glowing endorsement for being a passion project, again, I can't knock that. I think that's incredible. Markiplier, if you're listening, and I know that you are, come on the podcast. Let's talk about it. But I really do think you did a great job with this movie from a production standpoint. In terms of narrative and entertainment value, I did not understand this. I have a brief idea of what I think Iron Lung is about, but this movie confused me. It really did. I was kind of left in the dark on a lot of things. What I think this movie is about is that humanity is now a spacefaring race in this movie, and for some reason, there's this thing called um, the quiet rapture, in which stars and planets are just bodies in space are disappearing. Stars, moons, planets, they're disappearing. The sky is getting dimmer because these things are disappearing. And in addition to that as well, humanity also has space stations which are also disappearing as well. And so there's this idea of, well, is it more so humanity is being extinguished? Is that why the stars are getting, quote, dimmer because we're losing space stations and space stations give off light? Or is it really the planets and the stars being destroyed and consumed, or is it kind of a combination of both? I assume it's a combination of both, that there's some galactic catastrophe happening and humans are getting caught in the crossfire. Well, anyway, the film presents that humanity is now on the back foot. Humanity is now kind of a dwindling, dying race that's scavenging for survival amongst the stars. And there's this moon. There's no name for this moon, I don't believe. I don't think it's ever named. There's this moon that's comprised entirely, at least we're led to believe entirely. Again, there's not a lot of context for this, but there's this moon where the surface of it appears to be nothing but one giant ocean of blood. So, yeah, red water, blood, nothing but blood on this moon. And humanity has scavenged together a submarine to be put into this ocean of blood on this moon. And apparently there's something or many things hidden beneath the red waves that could help humanity. Markiplier plays a convict who is forced into the sub, and he's going to lead an expedition. He's an explorer, and by doing this mission, he will allegedly get his freedom back. That's essentially the movie. It really is kind of more or less a one-man show and a one-location show, type deal, one location set type deal. The minor spoiler, but I mean the sub does come back up for repair and retrofitting. But and there you get glimpses of other people, but really more or less this movie takes place entirely inside the sub below the waves and whatnot, below the ocean. And I'll say this, one thing that kind of bothered me about it that I don't think many people are talking about is that, again, there's a lack of context for a lot of things, but, like, I really would have appreciated a literal exterior shot of the sub. We never see a shot of the camera looking back at the sub inside of the red ocean. You know, everything we see of the outside of the red ocean, of the blood ocean, is just through this porthole, and so on and so forth. And then I assume that this is a mechanic of the game. There's an X-ray camera on the sub itself, and every time Markiplier triggers that camera, it takes a still photograph of what's in front of him to lead him, to guide him. And so the amount of X-rays required to present an image through the blood are so high that you know it can be damaging to individuals as well. And that also establishes kind of a scare factor, also in the sense that there's not this constant view of what's in front of you or behind you or beside you. You're literally getting flashes, singular images of what's around you. So, you know, one minute you're flashing, there's just nothing but the ocean floor in front of you. The next time you take a photograph, perhaps now you see a huge rock, in which case now you have to choose, do I pivot left or right? So there's interesting mechanics in this movie, some things that I've never thought of and never have encountered in all my science fiction and media consumption. I've never heard of a story where there's an entire planet comprised of an ocean of blood, nor have I ever had the idea to navigate a submarine via an X-ray photograph machine. Pretty cool, honestly. Pretty interesting ways to tell a story. And the story that it does tell, again, is hard to elaborate on because I don't fully understand it. Again, God bless Markiplier and everyone involved in the making of the movie, but like this movie is not great, and it's debatable if it's good at times as well. Because again, like there's just not a lot of context for this stuff. You don't know really who you're following or why he's there or what he's looking for. There's snippets, and perhaps that's meant to be part of the game's allure. Is just you're given breadcrumbs of a situation, and you as the player have to figure it out. That works great for a game. In fact, I think this movie would make a great book overall as well. That's another thought I had watching it. But as an actual movie, it's kind of hard to follow. And for it being over 2 hours, I mean, you kind of need something to plant your feet on, and there's frankly not a lot to do there. So the story aside, the lack of story aside, everything else I like about it. I like the set. The set's cool. I like the special effects for what there are. There's minimal special effects, but on the few instances you do get kind of a wider view of perhaps what's going on. Because throughout this movie, Markiplier, the lone crew, the lone operator of the sub, he's experiencing visions and he's hearing voices and whatnot. And so you get these kind of trippy, psychedelic type moments of what's real, what's not. Then you get instances of things that may or may not be outside the sub. And again, the X-ray photography used in this movie to represent his field of view is really cool as well. The imagery is actually pretty creepy looking and whatnot, and all that stuff. But yeah, getting the story aside, like visual effects wise, solid, very cool, dug it. Set wise, dug it, very cool. I like the sense of claustrophobia in this movie. Markiplier as an actor, bravo to him. I will give him my applause and his flowers because I don't know anything about him, and acting is hard. I mean, it just is. And I'm speaking as someone who has no acting experience, but like it looks really, really hard. There's a reason why not every actor wins an Oscar. It takes a lot of craft. It takes a lot of time. And so for him to literally lead 2+ hours worth of material on essentially his shoulders, with the other characters in this movie just basically providing voiceover, voices that he hears through a communication system inside the sub, he's on camera all the time. He has the actual physical body performance. He's not just a disembodied voice, you know. And so for him to do this, for him to step literally in front of the camera as well as behind it for this, bravo to him. I thought he did a really good job. And I'll say this too. while this movie is kind of convoluted in the sense that I have no idea what's going on, again, the imagery is cool, and I think that the second half is really cool as well. As pieces start to come together, as you get to see more things happening in his mind, uh, it's cool. I like what's there. I just wish I had a better grasp of what was actually happening so I could be more emotionally invested into what's going on. Because there are things that happen in this movie where it's like, okay, wait, like, why is that happening? Where did that come from? I okay, I guess we're just gonna keep pushing forward. That's something it feels like we're just moving along regardless of what's happening. And again, maybe that's the whole point of this. Maybe we're meant to be disoriented as a as an audience member, the same way Markiplier as the pilot of the sub is disoriented. If he's going for that effect, then he nailed it. You know, he nailed it completely. But I'm just saying, as a viewer, I it it was tough at times. It was tough. So look, um, this movie, as an actual movie itself, as a piece of narrative fiction, it's rough. You know, sorry, Mister Plier, Mister Mark. It's not the greatest thing I've seen all year. You know, but again, the faults aside, the faults of it being confusing, the faults of it being perhaps uninteresting because it's so confusing, the faults of it not laying a solid foundation for really anything going on around it. If you can get past these glaring, obvious, large scale issues, and if you can look at this as someone cutting their teeth in the world of filmmaking and someone trying to do their darndest with material that admittedly did not start from their own mind. Again, this is an adaptation of a game. So, even though he wrote it, directed, produced it, edited the whole deal, this concept is not his own. He had to adapt this from an existing piece of fiction. Um, if you can more so focus on the passion as opposed to the lack of cohesiveness, if you can focus more on the passion as opposed to the lack of sturdiness in this movie, I think you'll really enjoy it. Because what I see, though this is not an A plus movie, what I see is an A plus effort from someone trying to make a thing. And speaking on behalf of myself, I think that's incredible. He put his money where his mouth is, and he made this thing wholesale. This is all him, front to back. And I just think that's incredible. So look, is Iron Lung a good movie? Your mileage may vary. But is it worth seeing? Yes, absolutely, it is worth seeing. And I'll say this too, as someone who is not particularly fond of scary movies, I think you can handle this one. I think. Again, your mileage may vary. But this is a passion project. Passion is as plentiful as there is as much blood in this ocean on this alien moon. So yeah, Iron Lung. I'm glad it exists. I really am. It is a testament to filmmakers everywhere. It is a testament to creatives everywhere that you can do a thing. You can make something. You can transition from being just a consumer to a producer. And I think that's incredible. And yeah, so again, Markiplier, if you're listening, and I know that you are, uh, not don't just come on the podcast, uh, but also I hope that you just hear that. Just thank you for making this. Thank you for turning your dream into a reality, and thank you for inspiring creatives everywhere. And yeah, I guess we look forward to your next creative mission. And again, kids, at the time of this recording, being February 1st, 2026, Iron Lung is in theaters everywhere, and I think you should see it. All right, kids, moving on from movies that I have seen to movies that we will see, as there are things coming to theaters later this year. One of them that is fast approaching that I do not see a lot of buzz or talk about is a movie that I think should get more talk and buzz, and that is a new crime drama simply called Crime 101. Yes, this is a crime movie with crime in the title. So go crazy. This movie stars Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo, Halle Berry, among others. And this to me looks pretty gosh darn simple. And much like a Jason Statham movie, I think that's going to be a good thing for this movie. This looks like a straightforward cops and robbers movie where Chris Hemsworth plays a robber and Mark Ruffalo plays a cop or a detective, and Chris Hemsworth is some kind of thief, some guy that does heists, commits robberies, and Mark Ruffalo is chasing him down. And look, I love crime dramas. Heat 1995 is my favorite crime drama like ever. Like this is a kind of genre of movie making that you could do just over and over and over again. Yeah, we've seen plenty of cops and robbers movies. As I just said, Heat from 95 is my favorite crime drama movie. We've been making them long before 95. We've been making them long after 95. So for another one of these to come out, have we been there, done that? Yeah, we have. Okay, we just have. But it's a tested method of entertaining filmmaking, and I'm looking forward to this one. I love a good crime drama. I love a good cops robbers movie. Excuse me. And I think the cast is great. Again, you got Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo. So you got some Marvel love there. They play Thor and the Hulk respectively. And I like the posters. The posters. Well, I do like the posters. I like the trailers. I've seen trailers for this every time I've gone to the theater. Saw it with Shelter. Saw it with Iron Lung. I think this movie looks good, and I just hope that it gets more buzz. And this movie comes out uh, at the time of this recording, February 1st. In just 2 weeks, actually less than 2 weeks, it comes out February 13th. And so by the time that you're listening to this episode, whenever this gets released, we'll be that much more closer to Crime 101. And yeah, I hope that people check it out. I think it looks pretty good. Again, I think the posters and the trailers have been good. I think the cast is good. And I think that it's great. It's another crime movie starring cool people in cool roles. And there's really not much more I can say about it. I just like that this movie's coming out, and I hope that it gets on people's radar. And so yeah, Crime 101, starring Chris Hemsworth and Mark Ruffalo, releases later in February. And speaking of upcoming movies, whereas Crime 101 releases in 2 weeks, a collection of movies releases in over 2 years, essentially. If you did not know, kids, there was an idea called the Beatles Initiative. The Beatles, featuring Paul and uh, Ringo, George, and John, the band. You know, they have a collection of movies coming out in 2028. Yeah, so over 2 years away. And an image or a collection of images has been released showing off the main cast as their characters. You have Paul Mescal as Paul McCartney, Barry Keoghan as Ringo Starr, Joseph Quinn as George Harrison, and Harris Dickinson as John Lennon. And there's a new Beatles movie coming out, or should I say movies, because this is described as a four-part cinematic event directed by Sam Mendes. And what's going to happen is that Sony Pictures is going to release four Beatles movies in 1 year. So in 2028, we're getting a movie about Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, George Harrison, and John Lennon. And I assume at some point, whatever the fourth one is, that will culminate in them becoming the Beatles as a band. And so we're getting movies about each individual person with a quasi team up happening in one of the films. Again, whereas we had the Avengers initiative, we now have the Beatles initiative. I chose to talk about this because I find this movie so ambitious. It's hard to not talk about. It's almost like taking a big bite of food and knowing it's too big, but you keep chewing anyways. You're like, no, don't worry, I'll take care of it. You know, like I'll get it down. Like, who? 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 Kids, I'm an owl. Who is asking for four Beatles movies? Who is asking for a movie about each individual Beatle member? Look, I like the Beatles. I know people who love them. My favorite band is 21 Pilots. There's only two members in that band. Um, I know people who love the Beatles like you wouldn't believe. So I'm sure they might eat it up. But yeah, four movies all being released in 2028. That's a lot. That's a lot of food to chew on. Um, will we spit it out? I have no idea. As you can see, kids, my pun game is strong today. Yeah. So there's this image here showing off the four principal cast as their respective members. Um, look, for the sake of cinema, for the sake of the studio, I hope this thing succeeds. I'm sure these things weren't cheap. And when you have four movies coming out, back to back to back to back, gosh, that is such a huge undertaking. That is a lot of film. That's a lot of money spent too. That's a lot of time. Are we gonna want to watch 8 hours of the Beatles? I have no idea. Um, but you have years to decide, kids. Again, this thing is coming out in April of 2028. But we got our first look, so go crazy, I suppose. But yeah, a movie about each Beatle member coming out in 2028. And at some point, I'm sure that's going to coincide with them getting together as the group we all know and love. But yeah, a four-film cinematic event. Oh, all right. Well, will you be there? Uh, ask yourself that, kids. Will you be there? I don't know if I'll be there. And that's also another thing too. What if you just see two, or three? You know, like what if you're like, ugh, you know, I can't stand Ringo or George, but I love me some Paul McCartney and some John Lennon. Like, well, then you're gonna miss out. Or are these isolated stories that are loosely connected? I have no idea how they're gonna do this. This to me sounds like both a good bad idea and a bad good idea. And yeah, we will see how it pans out in 2028 when the Beatles get together on our movie screens, whether we like it or not. And keeping with a somewhat numerical trend of upcoming movies, while we're getting four Beatles movies in 2028, what we're also getting in 2028 is the 11th Fast and Furious movie. Yes, kids, Fast and Furious 11 is coming to theaters March 2028. And this movie is not simply called Fast 11, it is called Fast Forever. So Fast and Furious 11 is titled Fast Forever. Gotta be honest, pretty solid title, pretty dope. I will tip my hat to you, Fast and Furious. Um, okay. So look, I'll be totally honest. I think these movies are baller. I mean, if you like fast cars, cool action, heist movies, this to you is catnip. But in a film series where we have technically 11 movies now because there's 10 chapters, then there's that one spinoff called Hobbs and Shaw. So technically Fast and Furious 11 is going to be technically the 12th, but I digress. When you have as many movies as Fast and Furious does, they all can't be winners. In my opinion, 1 and 2 are winners. They're good. 3 is, which I know is kind of up for debate. I know people who love Tokyo Drift. Then you have simply titled Fast and Furious. You have the fourth one, which is a quasi reboot. That's where things started to get turned around. That's a pretty good one. Then you go on this hot streak, 5, 6, and 7, which are incredible action movies. They're incredible racing movies, crime movies, action movies. They've got it all. They're awesome. Their adrenaline is pumping. They're going full steam ahead. It's amazing. And then of course, in 7 you have the emotional component to it as well with I almost said Paul McCartney. With Paul Walker. passing away. Very sad, you know, that a real life death affected, the movie like that, we're still kind of, these movies, at least for me, they still carry a bit of bittersweetness to them, knowing that Paul Walker has passed on, but you go on this hot streak of 5, 6, and 7, which I think are legitimately amazing movies. And now we're in a cold streak of 8, 9, and 10. Um, boy, 8 has some redeeming qualities. I will hear an argument for 8. I will. Um, I might argue back that, it's not as good as you're making it sound. But if you present evidence to me that Fast and Furious 8 is good, I will say, please present your argument to me. I will hear you out. With 9 and 10, I mean, boy, that's like pushing a rock uphill. I mean, Fast and Furious 9 and 10 were tough to watch. They were too cheesy, too rambunctious, too over the top. I know, in a world of Fast and Furious, they somehow went too far over the top. They jumped the shark too many times. I get it. Because this movie franchise used to be about street racing. Now it's about saving the world from robots and, whatever. And, you know, uh, attaching cars to jets and going to space, which they did, and then swinging cars across the edges of cliffs, Tarzan style, which they also did as well. That's a true thing. Um, and then in the eighth one, by the way, um, they're being pursued by a submarine because sure, they're they and car the heroes in cars are being chased by a submarine. So you have submarines versus cars. At one point, the submarine launches a torpedo, and they're driving on the Arctic ice. So the torpedo breaks the ice, boop, and is sliding. It's traveling across the top of the ice, so it's visible. And Dwayne the Rock Johnson, the hero, we all we all demand, he's like, oh boy, that thing's gonna hit us. We can't have that. Here, hold the wheel. I'm gonna fix this problem. And in Fast and Furious 8, as this torpedo is traveling atop the Arctic ice, um, you have Dwayne Johnson and I don't know who it was, Ludacris or whatever. You have them pull up in their Chevy Citation, and and, and Dwayne the Rock Johnson nudges a torpedo with his bare hand to divert it off course. He literally pushes a live active torpedo to divert it away from his companions and into the enemy. That's Fast and Furious 8. So again, 9 and 10 were rough. Um, the evidence I present to the court is the movies themselves. So, but Fast and Furious 11, despite me having said all that I said about the franchise, about its misgivings regarding its last installments, will I be there in the theater, popcorn and soda in hand, for Fast and Furious 11, titled Fast Forever? Abso-freaking-lutely I will. You think I'm gonna miss this? Heck no. No, no, no. If this is the last one, and they've been threatening that for years, that this is the last one, I will be there. I will be there. And even if it's not the last one, I will still be there. Because these movies are fun. They're big, dumb, and whatever. But on occasion, they can get really serious and good and take themselves seriously. And if Fast and Furious 11 can do that, if they can scale this thing back and, land this plane or, parallel park the car, as it were, then great. Then yeah, then great. so yeah, Fast and Furious 11, titled Fast Forever, hits theaters March 2028, the same year that the Beatles are coming to town. So yeah, prepare yourself, kids. We have a lot of movies to watch in 2028. 4 Beatles and 1 Fast and Furious. That's gonna feel like 4 movies crammed into one, I'm sure. But yeah, Fast and Furious 11. You cannot get here fast enough. Thank you. Good night. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'll check it out. Will you? Well, much like the Beatles, you have a couple of years to decide. All right, kids. Moving on now from the world of movies and entering the world of TV. This This next topic here it is legitimately bittersweet because it also has to deal with the death uh, of an actor who, or an actress, I should say, you know, where their real life death is going to also affect the production of something that I legitimately enjoyed seeing them in. I'm talking about Catherine O'Hara. Excuse me if I mispronounce her name, but yes, Miss Hera. She sadly passed away, and I was not a big fan of her. It's not like she was someone I actively followed. I'm sure I've seen her in a bunch of stuff over the course of my life, but the last thing that I saw her in, and perhaps this is the last thing that she actually partook in, was Apple's The Studio, the TV show on Apple TV. And look, I love The Studio. It's funny for this segment of the podcast episode. I actually just finished the season, which is nuts. It took me months to watch this show. Um, Even though this thing is like made for me, this thing is about the making of movies. It's about the behind the scenes world of movies. It's called The Studio because it literally follows a film studio, and it talks about, you know, casting and getting actors and directors and producers and money and locations and making a movie and getting it released and yada yada. It goes through all the hoops that people have to jump through just to get a movie to screen. And it does it in dramatic fashion, in comedic fashion. If you're someone who is like myself, who loves the making of stuff when it comes to movies, this is a TV show all about that. You would think I would eat this up like chips. I would just binge watch it over the course of a couple of days, when in reality, this thing took me a couple of months. And I have no idea why. Because this series is phenomenal. It's really well made. It has a great cast. It has great cameos. It's funny, like I said. And from what I've heard of the production, everyone involved tried to get it as accurate as possible to the real deals that happen in Hollywood. And so if you want, you know, an exaggerated peek behind the curtain as to what goes on to make movies, check this thing out. I think you'll be thoroughly entertained. But yeah, as I said, despite the first season being incredible, and despite me loving it front to back, and despite me being bewildered at myself for it taking me this long to finish it, Catherine O'Hara, she played a role in the studio, and she sadly passed away back in January. And it's such a bummer because um, you know, where season one ended, I could have easily seen her come back into the role that she played on the show. And to now know that she won't be included is a real loss, I think, both for me as the consumer, but also for the producers on this TV show as well, for this whole production. I think that they really enjoyed having her, and she brought a really cool presence to the show, and I'm gonna miss her and her character, from this series. But season two of the show has been confirmed. It is coming via Apple TV. And so yeah, if you have not seen the studio, I highly recommend it. I think it's legitimately amazing. And yeah, it's a bummer now when we watch it, knowing that Catherine O'Hara, um, who played such a great role in it, just she won't be continuing on in that role. And yeah, it's a bummer. But um, that aside, though, she was part of a great production among several. And yeah, the studio on Apple TV is amazing, and I think you should check it out. And finally, kids, I saved the best for last. As I said, this episode is a buffet, and this last topic here is just nothing but a big piece of steak, kids. So please, let's dive in for this final course of this succulent meal, as it were. Did you know, kids, that we are returning to the moon? Yeah, we're doing it thanks to the NASA organization. There is a launch scheduled to happen sometime over the next couple of months. Could be actually very soon. It could happen as early as February, which is right now. We're in February right now, though it could be extended later into the calendar. But kids, I am talking about the Artemis program, and more specifically, the one coming up, known as Artemis 2. And this this is funny for me, kids. I love space. I do. I love it in terms of science fiction and both science fact. Yes, I love Star Wars, Star Trek, Halo, you name it. That's fun. That's awesome. Who doesn't love a good batch of sci-fi storytelling told across whatever medium you choose? That's great. But the actual science behind how things work and how our universe operates and the things that we don't know, the great unknown that is our universe and is space, is also just as cool, if not even more cool than what science fiction has to offer. Like, I'm all in on NASA, on space exploration. I listen to a lot of Neil deGrasse Tyson via his podcast. He has one called Star Talk, and he's your personal astrophysicist. Shout out to him, Mr. Uh, Neil deGrasse Tyson, if you're listening, and I know that you are. Please come on the podcast and let's talk about space and whatnot. But yeah, kids, so, of course, when you think of NASA, you're going to think of the moon landing of the Apollo program, as you should. It's one of the most crowning achievements in the history of our civilization. And, you know, to all the, the schemers out there, we did go to the moon. We did, we did not fake that. We did go to the moon several times and whatnot. But the Apollo program has been in our rear view. It's been like 5 decades, I think, since we last kind of had that kind of program under NASA. And at least for myself, most notably, we have things like the International Space Station that's still kicking, and we also have like rover missions that are going to Mars, because now Mars is our new target. Mars is the bullseye we want to hit now. Where we've kind of moved beyond the moon. We now are looking towards Mars. And of course, Elon Musk, politics aside, you can think whatever you want about him as a person, but his goals are to literally get people not only to Mars, but to also colonize and retrofit Mars for, the next batch of human exploration to go on to. So, that's pretty nuts. The idea that we now have people who are thinking of humanity as a multi-planet civilization is pretty freaking nuts. But to get there, kids, we have a long way to go. And I'm not talking about just literal miles, because we have a long way to travel, to get to Mars. But we also need to take tests. We need to review technology. We need to invent new technology. And in the wake now of Apollo, again, 5 decades ago was the Apollo program and whatnot. Here comes Artemis, which is scheduled to have many parts of its whole program. Artemis 1 has passed. I believe that was in 2022. We now have Artemis 2 coming up later this year. Then beyond that, we'll have Artemis 3 and so on and so forth. But while Artemis 2 is fast approaching, what we need to do is we need to take a look back at Artemis 1 and kind of realize what this whole thing is about and what it means for us as a country, what it means for NASA, what it means for us as humanity, so on and so forth. Okay, so as I said, Apollo was the bread and the butter. Apollo got us to the moon. Neil Armstrong, all that jazz. Okay, well now here comes the Artemis program, which Artemis 1 was an unmanned, there was no crew. It was a moon orbiting mission launched in 2022, and it was the first space flight as a part of NASA's new Artemis program. And it was really more so the first test flight of this new spacecraft called the Orion, and its space launch system. And really, the main objective of the test was to see if Orion was prepared properly, especially regarding its heat shield, for subsequent Artemis missions. Essentially, Artemis 1 was a tech run to see if Artemis was good to go beyond the first stage into Artemis 2, Artemis 3, so on and so forth. And these missions overall, they seek to reestablish a human presence on the moon and demonstrate technologies and approaches for future scientific studies, including getting to Mars and exploring Mars beyond just getting rovers on that planet. Okay, so again, Artemis 1 was an unmanned moon orbiting mission meant to kind of test technology. Okay, here comes Artemis 2 now, which is scheduled to potentially happen over the course of February, March, and April on very specific days as well, and I'll get to that in a minute. But now Artemis 2 is adding the human component back to the missions, where now we are sending a moon orbiting mission with people on it to test out this new technology on humans to see how we handle it and how we can prepare ourselves for deeper space travel. And so look, the selling point, the elevator pitch of Artemis is that we are returning to the moon. That is both technically correct and technically incorrect. Because Artemis 2, while having a manned crew orbiting the moon, Artemis 2 will not be landing on the moon. We're just simply meant to do kind of a flyby. No disrespect to Artemis and to their respective launches, but that's just kind of what's going on. Whereas Artemis 3 is scheduled to, I believe, return people to the moon, and then we go on from there, and it'll all be, Gucci Keen and all that jazz. And so Artemis is a really cool thing to keep our eyes on. So Artemis 2, and what it's becoming now, again, doing this lunar flyby to test out life support systems and other technologies and, run tests and whatnot. Artemis 2 stemmed from this idea also of us wanting to practice this idea of redirecting an asteroid, because it's no longer just, science fiction and whatnot. Like we've seen, movies like, Armageddon and Deep Impact of, oh my gosh, an asteroid, is going to come blow us up and whatnot. And while the chances of that are slim, thanks to planets like, Mercury and all the other members of our solar system, but also Earth's own atmosphere, they're able to burn up asteroids as they become, closer to us and whatnot. They protect us from an Earth-ending asteroid. The chance of that happening is not zero. Things get through. We've all seen footage of asteroids streaking across the night or day sky because they don't fully burn up in our atmosphere. Yet our atmosphere does a really good job of protecting us from space debris. Thank you, Lord. But the idea now that there might be a day where an asteroid too big to just simply burn up is coming our way is an issue. And so Artemis 2, or at least part of the Artemis idea, was to potentially involve the concept of redirecting an asteroid. How that happens, I have no idea. But essentially what this is that it's the Artemis program is being kind of repurposed for long-range missions and whatnot. Because, again, for us to intercept an asteroid, we would want to get to it as it's much farther away from us than it is closer to us, but I digress. And so essentially, as we're testing out these capabilities around the moon, we're eventually going to try to get to Mars and whatnot and expand humanity. And maybe in addition to that as well, we will also try to protect the Earth from asteroids and whatnot. Though I don't think the asteroid redirection is really the priority right now. But, I digress. Anyway, though, Artemis, as I said, is a multi-stage thing, going from Artemis 1 in 2022 to having no people involved, to now having Artemis 2 in 2026, having a crew involved, to Artemis 3, bringing people back to the moon, putting literal boots on the moon, and then beyond that, Artemis 4, 5, 6, or if there's another program or whatnot, we are now preparing ourselves to go to Mars. And Artemis 2 is the next step in that process. And this whole program, Artemis, I think is just awesome. Because here's the thing, kids. Stuff like this is important. It is. Stuff like this is important. It's important for the sake of culture. It's important for the sake of exploration. It's important for the sake of humanity. Because we as a race have constantly looked up and wondered, what's out there? How far can we go? What will we find? And since the Apollo program, when that was at the height of that, we frankly haven't really had that sense of curiosity. Now, as I've said, we've been doing other things. Elon Musk says he wants to go to Mars. We all say, good, great. send us a postcard. We've put rovers on Mars. That's been very cool as well. But we have not been captured by that sense of wonder and exploration like we were previously. And I think Artemis is going to change things. I think it's going to reestablish a new space, a new space race, a new space age for us. I think it's going to, excuse me, reinvent our sense of wonder and curiosity and exploration when it comes to space. And this is something that we should have. I truly, truly believe this. And I don't think we should just explore for the sake of exploration. I think we should explore for the sake of finding new resources, which could better our life on Earth. We should do it for, of course, finding alien life if it's out there. Excuse me. You know, you can't find something unless you look for it, so on and so forth. But I think it's also going to change our perspective on things because, as the astronauts have said, when you leave Earth and you're floating out there in space, in the vastness of space, and you look back on Earth and you see the big blue marble, you see just how small we are compared to the cosmos, it changes your perspective. That's what all the astronauts have said. It changes how you look at things. It offers you a different perspective, literally, metaphorically, spiritually, the whole deal. I think that's needed today in year 2026. And this idea that Artemis is now where Apollo left off, Artemis is now carrying the baton, I think is huge. I think it's huge, and I think people need to be aware of this stuff. I think this is a huge scientific achievement. I think it's a huge humanity achievement. I think it's a huge creative achievement. I love all this stuff. And getting past all the philosophical stuff and what it means for society and so on and forth. At the end of the day, this stuff is just so freaking cool. I mean, the idea that we're going to build more rocket ships and we're going to send people to other planetary bodies, to other things outside of our Earth. It's just so cool. How can you not look at a rocket and not be amazed? How can you not look at the stars and be amazed and wonder what's up there? As I said earlier, we've all had aspirations of being a famous filmmaker, a famous singer, a famous athlete, or whatever. The same is also said too for an astronaut. What kid hasn't wanted to be an astronaut? And of course, we're inundated now with all this amazing science fiction, all about exploring and finding new things and interesting planets and, saving humanity and so on and so forth. We have a natural built in curiosity about what's beyond Earth. We do. We do. We have that. And now Artemis is looking to expand that. It's going to put, our money where our mouth is, and I just think this is amazing. And what's nuts is that this whole Artemis thing really snuck up on me. Despite me saying all the things I've said, and despite me being such a big fan of space and NASA and all that stuff, I completely forgot that Artemis 2 was a thing. Like, funny enough, I actually think Francisco, I think Mr. Sojourn, shout out my boy. I think he was the one that brought up Artemis and its existence and whatnot. And I was like, oh, that's cool. But I never really put it together that this thing was happening because I think it seemed like it was so many years away. Well, now 2026 is now. We're there. We made it, And so yeah, Artemis 2 is gearing up to launch, to do its whole deal and whatnot. And what's interesting is that Artemis 2 has specific days for mission availability. It's not like they can just launch whenever they feel like it. They have certain parameters that they need to adhere to in terms of orbits and whatnot, weather patterns, yada, yada, yada. So all these are subject to change, but this is essentially a calendar breakdown of when Artemis could launch. And as you see here, Artemis could have launched on both the 6th, for February 6th, 7th, 8th, not the 9th for some reason, but the 10th or 11th. Well, now Artemis, at the time of this recording, it is either being fueled or is going to get fueled on the 2nd of February, meaning it could not hit its days of 6th or 7th in February for potential launch. It has to do rehearsals and wet dress rehearsals and stuff like that, and see how the literal fuel sits inside its respective, containers and all this stuff. They have to do a lot of tests. And so now the earliest Artemis could launch is February 8th. Though, if they miss that day for whatever reason, they got to do another test, weather isn't right, astronauts overslept, who knows? For whatever reason, they could do it on the 9th they could do it on the 10th or the 11th of February. If those 2 days don't work out, then we'd have to look to March. There's nothing else available in February for us to launch through. So then we have the March days respectively, and then looking to April, we have those days respectively as well. And kids, I'm really hoping Artemis launches in April, because one of the days that Artemis could launch on is my birthday. April 30th is my birthday. And to my friends, they might be shocked that I'm revealing my birthday in such a public platform, because I don't like to talk about my birthday and whatnot. But there it is. Yes, kids, for the sake of NASA, for the sake of exploration, I will reveal my birthday. It is April 30th. The idea, kids, that a NASA mission could launch on my birthday, that's already a gift right there. So, yes, it could happen in February. It could happen in April, or it could happen in March, or it could happen in April too. And if it's got to happen in April, hope it happens on the 30th. But yeah, kids, we're going back to the moon. We are. And Artemis 2 is the next step. And then eventually beyond the moon, that'll lead to Mars. And then who knows? It's like, not only is the world our oyster, but space is our oyster. It's right there. It's always been there for us to look up and wonder, for us to explore, and for us to finally get back to doing that. For us to tap back into something so innate in ourselves. This sense of exploration is crazy. And again, kids, like, how can you not look at like a rocket and just be like overwhelmed by it? The sheer size, the engineering, the literal cost that goes into it. Like, I mean, it's just, I'm like over the moon about this, pun intended. Like, I can't believe it. And like, I love everything I'm hearing about it. NASA has a great podcast going on as well, a good companion podcast that talks about Artemis and all that they're doing. NASA, is really keeping people up to date on this stuff. They're keeping us up to date. They're giving us crew interviews. They're giving us a lot of pictures. They're giving us calendars for this stuff. Artemis is fast approaching, and they want us to know. Like, this is a big deal for them because it's a big deal for us. So like, let's go. And what's cool too is like, there's a chance that we have the Artemis launch, the Super Bowl, and the Olympics happening almost like back to back to back. Like, yay for freaking humanity. Like, let's go. We got a full plate, just as how you kids have had a full plate with the Far Out podcast. So yeah, kids, that'll do it for this episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for watching and for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed all the commentary I have. I've shared on video games, on movies, on TV and whatnot, and also on what we're doing next as a species, as we're going back to the moon, kids. And so, it's just, what a cool time to be alive. The idea that we're going to have a new NASA launch with a full crew and everything happening potentially in this month, or potentially over the next just couple of months, is nuts, kids. And so, as I said earlier, I'm a big fan of Neil deGrasse Tyson. And to quote him on his very cool and educational Star Talk podcast, to quote the great Neil deGrasse Tyson to take us out today, keep looking up. All right. Bye-bye.